If you have a stiff ankle that's preventing you from squatting deep, then this is the video for you. And you're gonna wanna stay till the end because we present a unique approach to improving your ankle mobility. Let's get started. All right, so the intention of this video is to present to you a specific circuit or sequence. We'll start from deeper and then work to more superficial. So the first exercise we're gonna work on is ankle eversion. Now, why is ankle eversion important for dorsiflexion? Well, dorsiflexion itself is a linear direction. It's gonna go forward and back, and that's the general joint motion. But in order for you to have a linear capacity, you need to have rotational capacity first in the actual joint. So the ankle also has to be able to tilt. I'm going to use a slant board, but we'll have several modifications. And the goal for this is to try to find a stretch behind the ankle bone, more towards the center of the body, so more of the medial tissue. Let's say I was going to stretch my right ankle. I essentially want to keep my big toe in the upper left corner of the slant board, and then I'm going to stand up on the board. Now the goal is keep the foot flat, start to dorsiflex or take the knee past or towards the toes, and then let the knees start to slide down the ramp almost, and you're basically gonna fish and search for a stretch right behind that ankle. It may take a little bit of skill and practice to find the stretch, but once you have it, hang out there. The feet typically, they respond to longer duration holds because they're already so used to the volume of carrying our body weight around. So it's gonna take a little bit of time. Let's say that we've been here for 1 to 2 minutes. What I want you to do from there is eventually start to do a Pale's contraction, meaning I'm gonna start to press my foot through the board, and my goal is to squeeze the tissue where I feel the stretch. I'm essentially gonna try and press through the board like that, and I'm gonna hold that contraction. Maybe 30 to 60 seconds, building up the intensity, starting to get the rest of the muscles involved around the foot, the calf, driving through the board. Then right after, I'll be going into a rails contraction, or I'm simply gonna try and pull myself deeper into the stretch, which is squeezing all the stuff on front of the foot or behind on the outside of the ankle. So I'm essentially just gonna pull myself deeper into that. Again, 30 to 60 seconds, having a good contraction. Everybody's a little different. Sometimes they can go a little more intense, but if you're just starting this stuff, I would say go for longer duration stuff that's on a lighter intensity. So I would recommend anywhere from 1 to 2 sets of those isometric contractions. So maybe your total time in that stretch may be anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes. Then I would move on to the next exercise. Come on over. Okay, so we've worked the deepest stuff in the ankle first, right? Just the fundamental joint motion. And now we're gonna go to a more superficial layer, dorsiflexion of the ankle. And this is gonna be ideally more limited in more of the soleus, the Achilles tendon region, all the stuff that's kind of makes up the back of the calf. That's ideally what should be limiting you in dorsiflexion. If you do feel the restriction in the front of your ankle, you're gonna wanna spend more time doing the eversion stuff because that's probably gonna be more indicative of an actual joint restriction versus a more soft tissue restriction. But either way, you still wanna work on some dorsiflexion if that is your specific goal. So the first thing we'll be working for dorsiflexion is I have a box here, and essentially I'm gonna take my leg and my knee and drive it past my toes until I feel a stretch in the back of the actual calf. Now, the reason I like the box is that you can grab underneath that box and then essentially take your body weight and put it over your thigh, which gives a little bit more load into the stretch. Some of you will have a pinch in the hip and it's gonna prevent you from getting to this position. Don't worry, we have a modification coming up. For those of you that are in this, again, we wanna find a stretch in the back of the calf. You can start to search and explore. You should always explore your stretches and find different angles. Once you have a line of tissue that speaks to you, then we're gonna employ those Pale's rails, okay? So let's say you found a line of tissue, you're there passively just in that for about 60 seconds or so, breathing through that position, and now you'll start your Pale's contraction, which means you're gonna start to press your toes through the box, start to ignite the tissue under the foot, all the arch, and imagine it as if you were trying to raise your heel, but you're not gonna go anywhere. You're just simply trying to contract that tissue in the back. Feels pretty good. Again, 30 to 60 seconds, longer duration, because we want to change more of the architecture behind that. So we actually want to change the makeup of the tissue that's being elongated. Then once we've done that, we'll go into a rails contraction, and simply I'm going to squeeze the top of my foot or the front of my shin and drive my knee forward, as if I was in the bottom of a squat, holding that contraction for 30 to 60 seconds. So for those of you that felt a pinch in your hip or your knee doesn't quite bend as well, but you still need to work dorsiflexion, don't worry, I got you. We have another modification for that. Okay, so for this modification, we're gonna need a yoga block or some kind of step that you can use to basically elevate your foot on. So in this case, I'm gonna use my right ankle. This is the one we're gonna stretch for dorsiflexion. And the reason I'm doing this is so my left leg can kind of be relaxed. Now with the yoga block, I also have something that I can hold on for balance, right? Whether it's a stick, wall, anything like that. And then essentially I'm gonna drive my knee past my toes or as far as I can and find a similar stretch that I did on the box. So if your hip does not allow you to get into that earlier position, this is a great alternative. You want to balance yourself so that you're not just exhausting your quad, you're actually trying to stretch more of the posterior part of your ankle, of your calf, okay? And then the same protocol applies. In this case, I'm going to act like I'm gas pedaling when I want to do my patelis contraction or activate that elongated stuff. So I'll press through the block as if I'm going to do a calf raise, right? Again, 30 to 60 seconds. And then I'll reverse, try to drive my knee forward or pick my toes up as I increase active dorsiflexion, which will come in handy when we're doing our squats. Some things to keep in mind: if you do feel a pinch in the front of that ankle, you can either back out of that stretch a little bit or try to move your knee around and go around that pinch. You don't want to push through your pinches because it's just going to inflame that joint. So we always want to work from a pain-free position. Once you've done one of those dorsiflexion drills, you're going to need to grab an object so that we can work into eccentrically strengthening the calf muscle. This is what I'm going to use. Woo! Oh, that's a workout right there. So the next logical step after we've created some range of motion with our isometrics is we need to reinforce that range. And I think the best way to do that is going to be eccentric. Now, why eccentrics? So eccentrics are lowering into a range of motion. When you lower into a range of motion, you're also strengthening that range through elongating it, meaning that as we start to go down into that motion, we're actually adding more force and we have a potential to change the tissues over the long term, which is what we want. We want to change them to be more elastic or more extensible. If you don't have a random 100-pound sandbag like I do here, you can use a step, you can use a box, you can use the slant board if you have one. So I think the best way to set up for this is actually to face the wall, because the wall is going to give you a little bit more support. And with that, you don't have to worry about balance, and you can focus most of your energy in trying to put the resistance and the load into the targeted tissue that you want. Then we'll take about 6 to 10 seconds to lower. As you lower into that motion, think about pressing through the surface that you're on, squeezing the calf more, and getting to the bottom of that movement. Once you get to the bottom, you can cheat with your other foot and then extend. Same thing, 6 to 10 seconds. This is the eccentric portion. If you notice, it's almost like lowering down into a squat. So it's even more specific to what we're trying to do. Except this time, we're actually focusing a lot of our body weight on the posterior part of the calf. I would recommend doing 6 to 10 second lowers, anywhere from 90 seconds to 2 minutes continuous. Near failure. You really want to put a signal into that posterior tissue of the calf to start to change and grow. You need to do that over time, but you need to do that with enough intensity and longer duration so we get those changes. So for some of you, the body weight version may be too easy. In that case, hold on to a kettlebell or dumbbell in your offhand so that you can use this to add more load. However, when you're adding more load, you want to make sure that you're still keeping the same tempo. So again, that 6 to 10 second lower, control all the way through the motion, press your big toe and your toes through the ledge that you're on so that you actually get more contraction in that elongated tissue. Keep the knee slightly bent, drive the knee forward as you lower the heel down. So now that we developed eccentric strength in our calf, it's actually time to develop concentric strength in our shin. Okay, so the last part of what we're trying to work with our ankle is actually strengthening all of the stuff that's in front of the shin. And that's what we talked about, having more of neurological control. So you have to have space to move in, then you have to have the control of that space and the strength in that space so that you can actually do the things you want to do. So for us, having more control and more strength in our ability to dorsiflex will translate into better squatting outcomes because you're able to pull yourself deeper into the squat. But just to give you a visual, we'll be using an ankle weight. I want my knee to be bent. There's a lot of variations with the knee straight and it's great, but I think it's more specific to have a bent knee for squatting in general. Essentially what I'll do is I'll let my foot extend and then I'm going to pull up into active dorsiflexion as high as I can and then control that eccentric down. So what we're trying to do is strengthen all of the tissue in front of the shin, which allows us again to pull deeper into the squat. When you're going into that, I want you to think about pulling up at different angles, right? Because remember, when you dorsiflex, you're not just dorsiflexing in one direction. If you look at it, there's several different avenues of dorsiflexion, and that's why we want to have more options in our squat. So we want to strengthen those options. So you'll be pulling up, holding for a second or two, slowly going back down. I don't really count reps as much as I think about time, so you want to focus on maybe 1 to 2 minutes of continuous slow repetitions to try to build more conditioning in the front of that shin tissue. Another modification for the Shin Raise would be using a wall sit position and having a mini band. Mini band is optional here. You can still make it hard without the band, but if you want a little more load, I would suggest the band. Bend your knees about 90 degrees or so, and then you can just simply work on flexing that foot up and controlling on the way down. It's not a huge range of motion, but it is enough to start to activate more of that tissue here. If you want to make it more difficult, you can move further away from the wall. You can even bend your knees a little further down, and the same thing applies. 1 to 2 minutes of work, try to condition the front of the shins, and now we're working again into that active dorsiflexion motion. Those are the 4 exercises that we think will help increase your ankle dorsiflexion to improve your squatting outcomes. Now remember, we presented them in a specific order from deepest to more superficial, and I would recommend you do that order if you can, as well as doing them all on one ankle before you switch to the other ankle. With each set, we recommend starting with low intensity and then moving to higher intensity as you feel more confident. Same thing, start with no external load, and then start with adding more load when you feel like you need more stimulus. As far as frequency goes, I would recommend 1 to 2 sessions a week. Do them when you're most fresh because you're gonna give your best energy to those. Progressing these drills over time can certainly help improve your ankle dorsiflexion, and with that, your squat. But are there other joints that might be limiting your ability to squat deeper? The answer is yes, and the hip is one of them. And for that, you're gonna wanna watch this next video.